Commander Elena Reyes stood at the viewport of the UES Intrepid, humanity's first true interstellar vessel, as it approached the massive structure that housed the Galactic Conclave. The station resembled a gleaming metal flower blooming in the void, its petals housing representatives from over 24 spacefaring civilizations. After centuries of wondering if they were alone in the universe, humanity's answer had arrived 3 years ago in the form of a small probe entering Earth orbit, bearing an invitation. Magnificent, isn't it? Captain Hiroshi Tanaka joined her at the viewport, his usually stoic expression softened by wonder. Magnificent and intimidating, Elena replied. As Earth's chosen representative, selected for her diplomatic skills, as much as her military background, she carried the weight of humanity's future on her shoulders. Did you review the cultural briefing on the Vraxians? Hiroshi's face tightened. Yes, Commander. They're the dominant military power in this sector, evolved from apex predators with exoskeletal protection. Their social hierarchy is based entirely on martial prowess. Elena nodded, and they've requested a private meeting with our delegation before the general welcome. The docking procedures took nearly an hour, alien protocols merging with human technology in a delicate dance of airlocks and gravitational adjustments. When the doors finally opened, Elena led her team of 12 scientists, diplomats, and security personnel into their first contact with galactic society. The reception chamber stunned them into momentary silence. Bioluminescent creatures floated near the ceiling, casting a gentle, shifting light across the gathering. Gravity seemed lighter in some areas than others, allowing various species to mingle in their preferred environments. Foods that changed color and texture as they were consumed were being served by hovering robotic attendants. Their guide, a willowy being with translucent skin who had introduced herself as Emissary Ixon of the Talon Confederation, gestured toward a group of imposing figures at the chamber center. The Vraxian delegation awaits you. Commander Reyes, High Marshal Kurthak has expressed particular interest in humanity. Elena caught the subtle flick in Ixon's inner eyelid, a warning perhaps. She straightened her dress uniform and approached the Vraxians, aware that first impressions would be critical. Kurthak stood nearly 7 feet tall, his burgundy exoskeleton polished to a gleam that reflected the chamber's lights. 6 limbs, 4 arranged as arms and 2 as legs, moved with precise, controlled motions that spoke of lethal capability. His facial structure reminded Elena of a mantis, with compound eyes that seemed to evaluate and dismiss her in the same moment. So this is Earth's champion. Kurthak's voice emerged from vibrating plates near what might be considered a throat, translated by the small device affixed to Elena's collar. You are smaller than expected. Elena smiled diplomatically. We humans often find strength in unexpected places, High Marshal. A clicking sound emerged from the Vraxian delegation. Laughter, the briefing had said. Indeed. Kurthak gestured to a hovering tray. Perhaps you would honor us by participating in a traditional greeting, the sharing of sustenance. Elena noticed her translation device flickered momentarily, a glitch, or a deliberate mistranslation. She accepted the offered cup containing an iridescent blue liquid. The analytical part of her mind registered that her delegation had been seated at a noticeably lower table than the other species, a subtle but clear statement of their perceived status. To new alliances, Kurthak raised his own vessel, his mandibles clicking softly. Elena raised her cup in response, but before she could drink, Kurthak's arm moved with startling speed, jostling her deliberately. The blue liquid splashed across her uniform, immediately smoking as it made contact with the fabric. Several nearby alien dignitaries gasped or made equivalents of the sound in their own biology. The liquid burned through to her skin, but Elena didn't flinch. The pain was intense. Chemical analysis would later reveal it contained acids that would severely damage Vraxian hide. But she maintained her composure, calmly pulling a cloth from her pocket to dab at the spreading stain. My apologies, Kurthak's translator conveyed, though his body language suggested anything but regret. Your species' reflexes are underdeveloped. The chamber had grown quiet, all attention focused on this interaction. Elena understood suddenly that this wasn't a diplomatic faux pas. It was a test, carefully orchestrated to establish humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy. "No harm done, High Marshal," she replied evenly, though the acid continued to burn. "On Earth, we have far more corrosive substances. Some humans even consume them for enjoyment." A ripple of surprised murmurs spread through the assembled aliens. Kurthak's compound eyes narrowed, his mandibles clicking rapidly in what the briefing had identified as irritation. "Perhaps you would prefer a different form of welcome." "Then," the Vraxian said, his translated voice carrying throughout the now silent chamber, "as the dominant military power in this sector, it is Vraxian tradition to assess new species through ceremonial combat. I formally challenge you, as Earth's representative, to meet me in the arena of truth. The outcome will establish your species standing among the stars. You can't seriously be considering this." Dr. Amara Chen's holographic projection flickered in the secure quarters assigned to the human delegation. Her dark eyes flashed with concern as she paced, the quantum communication array struggling to maintain her image across light years. "Elena, these Vraxians evolved as apex predators. Their exoskeletons can withstand impacts that would shatter human bones." Elena sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, her breathing measured despite the synthetic skin patches covering the acid burns on her chest. "I'm not just considering it, Amara. I've already accepted." The delegation room erupted in controlled chaos. Diplomats arguing protocols, security officers reviewing what little they knew of Vraxian physiology. Only Elena remained still, centered amidst the storm. "The challenge was deliberately designed to be unwinnable," Hiroshi said, projecting combat footage they'd managed to extract from public conclave records. "Look at their previous ceremonial combats. 17 species have faced this exact scenario. All now occupy protected status positions in conclave hierarchy." The holographic display showed battles, or rather, slaughters, each following the same pattern. The challenged species would either decline, accepting immediate subordinate status, or fight, and be so thoroughly dominated that their defeat became a cultural touchstone, referenced for generations to justify their lower place in the galactic order. "What they don't understand," Elena finally opened her eyes, "is that humans have been fighting ourselves for our entire existence. We've had to become students of combat in ways that apex predators never needed to." Dr. Chen's hologram approached a secondary display showing Vraxian anatomical scans. "I've been analyzing their physiology since we received the invitation 3 months ago. There's something peculiar about their neural structure." She highlighted sections of the alien's central nervous system. "These clusters here, and here, they're overprotected by redundant exoskeletal plates. Evolution doesn't waste resources protecting something unless it's vulnerable." Elena stood, moving to examine the display more closely. Natural armor has a trade-off. It has to allow for movement. She traced junction points between the armored segments. "Every joint is a potential weakness." "Commander," a young lieutenant interrupted. "The Talon emissary is requesting entrance. Says it's urgent and private." Minutes later, the willowy alien stood in their quarters, her translucent skin pulsing with what appeared to be anxiety. "What I am doing violates no specific conclave regulation." Khan began, her inner eyelids flicking rapidly, but would be considered inappropriate by many. She produced a small crystalline device. "This contains historical recordings of all previous Vraxian ceremonial combats, including practice sessions not meant for foreign observation." Hiroshi frowned. "Why help us?" The Talon were the 4th species to face the Vraxian challenge. John's voice lowered. "We have spent 3 centuries under their protection. Not all of us believe this hierarchy serves the Conclave's original purpose." After Xan departed, Elena spent hours absorbing the combat footage, noting patterns invisible to casual observation. The Vraxians relied on their natural advantages, They had never needed to develop the analytical approach to combat that humans had perfected through millennia of warfare against equally matched opponents. Their movements telegraphed their attacks, she murmured, replaying a sequence for the 10th time. They've never needed deception because their speed and strength were always sufficient. While the human diplomatic team drafted contingency plans for their likely defeat, Alina transformed their quarters into a makeshift training facility. Simulations of Vraxian attacks played on holographic projectors as she moved through combat forms adapted specifically to exploit the weaknesses she'd identified. On the 3rd day, a message arrived from Kurfak. I trust you've used your preparation time wisely. Most species spend it updating their final affairs. As Alina prepared to enter the arena, Dr. Chen's hologram appeared one final time. I've been analyzing your vitals during training. You're pushing human capabilities to their theoretical limits. She hesitated. Alina, even if you've identified their weaknesses, the physical disparity is enormous. Alina secured her hair in a tight combat braid, her movements precise and economical. Apex predators stop evolving once they reach the top. They have no need to improve. She met her friend's worried gaze. But humans? We've never stopped pushing our limits. Our greatest strength isn't in our bodies. It's in here. She tapped her temple. They expect a diplomat who knows ceremonial combat forms. They're getting a tactical specialist who's spent her life studying how to defeat superior opponents. When Alina stepped toward the arena entrance, her team was shocked to see her remove the armored components of her combat suit, leaving only the flexible undergarment. Hiroshi started to protest, but Alina silenced him with a raised hand. They expect me to try to protect myself, she explained calmly. I need full mobility more than I need armor. Besides, a slight smile crossed her face. Sometimes the greatest advantage is being underestimated. The arena of truth resembled nothing so much as a colossal amphitheater reimagined by alien minds. Alina stood in the shadowed entrance tunnel, taking in the spectacle before her. Tiered seating rose in concentric rings, separated by shimmering atmospheric barriers that maintained different environmental conditions for each species. Some sections glowed with bioluminescent light, others remained shrouded in near darkness, while certain areas seemed filled with swirling mists or contained what appeared to be liquid environments. Quite the audience, Hiroshi murmured beside her. Representatives from all 27 conclave species. Alina nodded, her eyes scanning the central combat area. A circular platform, roughly 30 meters in diameter. Currently blank and featureless, she knew it would transform to replicate Vraxian homeworld conditions once the combat began. Surrounding the platform, hovering drones projected real-time data about both combatants into the air for all spectators to see. Your vital signs are being broadcast, Hiroshi pointed. They're making quite a show of comparing your biology to Kurfak's. Indeed, floating above the arena, holographic anatomical comparisons highlighted the disparity between human and Vraxian physiology. Alina's skeletal structure appeared fragile next to Kurthak's reinforced exoskeleton. Her muscle density was labeled unremarkable, while the Vraxian's was exceptional. Most pointed was the weapons comparison. Alina's entry simply stated none, while Kurthak's natural armaments were cataloged in detail. A melodious tone echoed through the chamber, signaling the imminent start of proceedings. Hiroshi placed a hand briefly on Alina's shoulder. Remember, there's no shame in conceding. Your safety is worth more than. This isn't about pride. Alina interrupted gently. This is about humanity's future. How we're perceived now will determine our place in this community for generations. The announcement began, a multilingual introduction that the translation devices rendered into English. Esteemed representatives of the Conclave, today we witness the integration ceremony of humanity, the 28th species to join our galactic community. As is tradition when a martial species sponsors integration, ceremonial combat will determine appropriate hierarchical placement. Alina's eyebrows rose slightly. Martial species. They've classified us as warriors. Based on our history, apparently, Hiroshi replied. though they clearly don't think much of our capabilities. The announcement continued. Representing humanity, Commander Elena Reyes of Earth's United Space Command. Representing the Vraxian Imperium, High Marshal Kurthak, Sovereign Protector of the Outer Rim. The crowd's attention shifted to the opposite entrance as Kurthak emerged on a hovering platform. His exoskeleton had been polished to a deep crimson sheen, adorned with ornamental plates that Elena recognized as ceremonial rather than functional. The Vraxian contingent erupted in rhythmic clicking sounds as their champion raised his upper limbs in acknowledgement. Commander Reyes, the announcer continued, "You may enter the arena." Elena took a deep breath, centering herself. She stepped into the light, wearing only the flexible black undersuit that offered minimal protection. A confused murmur rippled through the audience. The combat protocols permitted full armor within certain parameters, and her choice appeared incomprehensible. As she walked barefoot toward the center, the hovering data displays updated. Human combatant has declined standard protective gear. Survival probability adjusted to 7.2%. The arena floor began to transform beneath her feet. The smooth surface shifted, becoming coarse red sand. Temperature controls activated, raising the ambient heat to uncomfortable levels. Gravity increased by approximately 20%, and the atmosphere thinned, making each breath slightly more labored. Vraxian homeworld conditions established. The announcer declared, "Atmospheric composition. Nitrogen-oxygen mix with elevated carbon dioxide. Temperature, 42 degrees Celsius. Gravity, 1.2 Earth standard." Elena felt the immediate effects, the increased weight of her limbs, the sweat already forming on her skin, the subtle strain on her lungs. But her expression remained impassive. From the corner of her eye, she noticed several diplomatic observers leaning forward with interest at her lack of visible distress. An ancient Xer representative, body formed of crystalline structures that caught the light in hypnotic patterns, transmitted a private message to her earpiece. "We witnessed this same ritual with 18 species before. None survived without permanent injury. You should forfeit now, while surrender terms remain generous." Elena didn't respond, her focus entirely on Kurthak as he descended from his platform. Standing before her, the Vraxian towered nearly 2 feet taller. His exoskeleton segments shifted, revealing previously concealed natural weapons, serrated edges along his upper limbs, hook-like protrusions at his joints. The combat will proceed until one participant concedes or is rendered incapable of continuing, the announcer explained. Lethal force is prohibited by conclave law, though accidents have been known to occur. Kurthak's mandibles clicked rapidly in what Elena now recognized as anticipatory amusement. "I will try not to damage you too severely, human," his translator conveyed. "Your species may yet serve a useful purpose in the hierarchy." Elena remained silent, her bare feet shifting slightly in the sand, feeling its texture, density, and give. She had already noted how it might affect movement and traction. While Kurthak performed an elaborate series of intimidation displays for the audience, she was mapping the arena, measuring distances, identifying position advantages. "Combat begins at the signal," the announcer declared. A high-pitched tone sounded, and Kurthak launched forward with shocking speed. Kurthak's initial strike came with blinding speed, a sweeping motion with his primary right limb aimed directly at Elena's torso. To the audience, it appeared the human had no chance to react. Yet at the last possible moment, Elena shifted minutely, turning her body to transform what would have been a devastating impact into a glancing blow. The hit still sent her tumbling across the coarse red sand, her body leaving a long trail as she rolled with the momentum. A collective sound, the diverse species equivalent of a gasp, rippled through the arena. "First contact established," the announcer declared unnecessarily. "Human combatant shows minimal defensive capability." Elena rose to her feet, blood trickling from her split lip. In the diplomatic observation box, Dr. Chen studied the neural monitoring displays with intense focus. "Look at her brain patterns," She whispered to Hiroshi. That's not pain response. That's analysis. Indeed, Alina's neural activity showed spikes in regions associated with spatial processing and pattern recognition rather than pain centers. As Kurthak circled her, mandibles clicking in anticipation, she wasn't fighting panic. She was collecting data. The Vraxian attacked again, this time with a complex series of strikes using multiple limbs in a pattern that had overwhelmed previous opponents. Alina didn't attempt to block the powerful blows directly, a futile effort given the strength disparity. Instead, she moved with a fluid economy, redirecting forces, allowing some hits to land where her body could best absorb them while avoiding critical impacts. Blood now streamed from a gash above her eye, and her breathing had grown labored, but those watching closely noticed something puzzling. She was making minute adjustments to her stance and movement with each exchange. In the Vraxian observation section, a senior military advisor leaned forward with growing concern. Something is wrong. She's fighting incorrectly. Kurthak seemed to sense this too. His attacks grew more aggressive, abandoning the ceremonial combat patterns for brutal, efficient strikes, meant to end the contest quickly. When Alina again evaded complete disaster but took a hit that sent her crashing into the arena wall, he raised his limbs in presumptive victory. Your species learns slowly, human, his translator conveyed. Concede now and preserve what dignity remains. The audience had begun to lose interest, many turning to side conversations or refreshments. They'd seen this outcome before, brave but futile resistance before inevitable surrender. Alina pushed herself up from the sand, blood dripping onto the red grains beneath her. She wiped her face, leaving a crimson streak across her cheek. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. "You're right, High Marshal," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the translator system. "Humans do learn. We learn from everything, especially failure." Something in her tone caused the distracted audience to refocus their attention. For example, Alina continued, shifting her weight subtly. "I've now experienced 17 different strike patterns from your species. I've cataloged the neural signals that precede each. I've measured the exact transfer of kinetic energy through your exoskeletal joints." Confusion rippled through the arena. This wasn't how defeated combatants spoke. Kurthak's compound eyes narrowed. "Your analysis will not save you from." He never finished the sentence. Alina moved with sudden, explosive speed that caught even the monitoring systems by surprise. Instead of retreating from the Vraxian's next attack, she stepped into it at precisely the angle that disrupted his balance. Her open palm struck a point between armored plates where she had observed micro-movements during his previous attacks, a nerve cluster that his species evolved to protect through behavioral adaptation rather than physical armor. The sound of Kurthak's pained screech silenced the arena. His right upper limb hung momentarily useless, neural signals disrupted by Alina's precisely targeted strike. In the diplomatic box, Hiroshi stared in disbelief. How did she? Pattern recognition, Dr. Chen whispered, her eyes locked on the neural displays. She wasn't fighting back for the first exchanges. She was building a predictive model of his nervous system through observed responses. The audience erupted in confusion. The data displays above the arena frantically recalculated combat projections as Alina pressed her momentary advantage, moving inside Kurthak's guard to deliver a sequence of strikes to precisely the same vulnerability on his left side. When the Vraxian counterattacked in fury, swinging massive limbs with enough force to shatter bone, Alina was no longer where he expected. She had already calculated his most probable response and positioned herself accordingly. "Impossible," hissed a Vraxian military observer. "She fights as if she knows our movements before we make them." "Not impossible," the ancient Exer representative replied, crystalline structures vibrating with interest. "She has created a combat algorithm through real-time analysis. I've never seen this approach from any species." On the arena floor, the dynamic had shifted perceptibly. Kurthak's attacks grew increasingly desperate and predictable. When he committed to a powerful lunging strike that would have ended the contest, Elena executed a perfect counter that used his momentum against him. The sound of his exoskeletal joint dislocating with a sickening crack echoed throughout the now silent arena. The combat status display updated. Analysis. Human combatant employing methodological adaptive response techniques. Survival probability recalculated, 31.7%. Kurthak reeled back, mandibles flaring in what human xenobiologists would later identify as an expression of shock and rage. His dislocated limb hung at an unnatural angle, leaking a viscous blue fluid where Elena's precise strike had found the gap between armored plates. For 3 heartbeats, absolute silence gripped the arena. Then chaos erupted. The Vraxian contingent rose in their section, chittering with indignation. Several representatives from other species were frantically consulting reference materials or whispering to aides. In the human diplomatic box, Hiroshi's eyes were wide with disbelief. Combat pause requested by Graxian delegation. The announcer's voice echoed. Citation. Unauthorized knowledge of physiological vulnerabilities. Elena stood calmly in the center of the arena, blood still flowing from the gash above her eye, but her breathing now controlled and even. I claim no prior knowledge, she stated clearly. Only observation and adaptation. From the senior council section, the ancient Morrigan representative, a beam of shifting, smoke-like consistency contained within an environmental field, made a gesture that immediately silenced the chamber. The human speaks truth. Neural monitoring confirms real-time analytical processes. No rules violation has occurred. The combat pause lifted, but Kurthak was a different opponent now. Gone was the ceremonial posturing, the performative dominance. His eyes had narrowed to slits, his movements becoming tighter, more efficient, a predator who suddenly recognized genuine threat. His next attack came with brutal efficiency, abandoning the traditional forms for pure killing intent. He drove Elena back across the arena with a flurry of strikes from his remaining functional limbs, finally connecting with a devastating blow to her ribcage. The sound of cracking bone was unmistakable. Elena crashed into the arena wall, sliding down to one knee. Blood spattered the red sand as she coughed, her left arm wrapped protectively around her torso. Internal monitoring displays flashed warnings. 3 ribs fractured, possible pneumothorax developing, pain indicators exceeding normal tolerance thresholds. In the observation box, Dr. Chen leaned forward in alarm. She can't continue like this. The physical damage is. She stopped mid-sentence, staring at the neural readings with scientific bewilderment. That's impossible. Her pain processing centers are. She's rerouting the signals somehow. On the arena floor, Elena rose once more to her feet. She straightened her posture despite the broken ribs, her face showing not agony but intense focus. Her breathing had changed, shallow and controlled, using techniques developed by Earth's special forces for combat survival after critical injury. Remarkable pain tolerance, observed the XR representative, crystalline structures vibrating with scientific interest. Is this common in your species? Not common, Hiroshi replied quietly, but not unheard of. On Earth, we have combat sports where contestants voluntarily accept traumatic brain injury for entertainment. Our history is filled with humans who continued fighting despite injuries that should have been incapacitating. Kurthak circled Elena warily now, his remaining combat limbs held in a defensive posture that none of the previous challengers had forced him to adopt. You cannot win through endurance alone, human, his translator conveyed. You are already broken. Elena's response was unexpected. She smiled through bloody teeth and moved forward rather than back, entering Kurthak's strike zone deliberately. That's where you fundamentally misunderstand humans, High Marshal, she said, her voice steadied despite her injuries. We don't break. We adapt. What followed stunned even the most ancient observers of the conclave. Elena abandoned conventional defensive tactics entirely, moving inside Kurthak's guard to strike at the connecting points between his exoskeletal plates. Each blow targeted neural clusters that his species had never needed to protect, vulnerabilities that only became apparent when one considered Vraxian physiology not as an integrated system, but as evolutionary components with potential failure points. The Vraxian fought with increasing desperation, landing powerful strikes that opened new wounds on Alina's body. But each time he connected, she accepted the damage to secure superior position. It was a combat philosophy alien to the Vraxians, the willingness to sacrifice physical well-being for tactical advantage. "She fights like no species we've encountered," the Morrigan representative commented, smoky form swirling with agitation. Not to minimize injury, but to maximize effect, regardless of personal cost. In the arena, the culmination approached rapidly. Alina, bleeding from multiple wounds and fighting through pain that would have incapacitated most beings, executed a sequence of strikes with surgical precision. Her final move, a perfectly timed strike to the neural cluster behind Kurthak's sensory ridge, followed by a joint lock that exploited the natural constraints of his exoskeletal structure, brought the massive Vraxian crashing to the ground. The arena fell silent but for Alina's labored breathing as she stood over her fallen opponent, bloodied but unbowed. Combat concluded. The announcer's voice wavered slightly, the first indication of emotion from the supposedly neutral system. Victory to the human representative. Alina stood swaying slightly over Kurthak's unconscious form, her body a tapestry of injuries. Medical drones hovered at the arena's edge, awaiting permission to enter, their sensors already cataloging her damage. 3 broken ribs, a partially collapsed lung, significant blood loss, torn shoulder ligaments, and a fracture to her left orbital socket. The silence that gripped the arena was unlike anything in recent conclave memory. None of the diplomats, military observers, or scientific representatives moved or spoke. They were witnessing something none had predicted, the foundational disruption of a power structure that had existed for thousands of years. "The human requires medical attention," the Exer representative finally announced, crystalline form pulsing with unusual urgency, "and the Vraxian High Marshal must be stabilized." As if breaking from a trance, the arena burst into chaotic activity. Medical teams rushed to both combatants, though the attention toward Alina carried distinctly more deference than would have been shown hours earlier. In the diplomatic box, the human delegation was already managing the cascading consequences of this unexpected victory. "We're receiving communication requests from 17 species," Hiroshi reported, his fingers dancing across multiple interfaces. "Some were previously unwilling to even acknowledge our diplomatic status." Dr. Chen ignored the political machinations, her focus entirely on Alina's medical readings. "Get me down there," she demanded. "Their medical protocols won't account for human physiological responses to trauma." 3 hours later, Alina awoke in a recovery chamber designed for multiple species. The room's environmental settings had been adjusted to Earth standard, and the medical drone attending her wore the insignia of human medical protocols. A small but significant acknowledgement of humanity's new status. "How bad?" Alina asked, her voice raspy. "You'll live," Dr. Chen replied dryly, though relief showed clearly on her face. "Though I suspect you'll be setting off security scanners for years with all the synthetic bone welds." Alina attempted to sit up, wincing as her injuries protested. "And Kurthak?" "Recovering, though his pride may never heal," Hiroshi answered from the doorway. He entered carrying what appeared to be a small crystalline tablet. "Alina, you need to see this." The tablet displayed multiple feeds from across conclave space, news transmissions, diplomatic channels, and public information networks, all focused on the combat and its aftermath. On a Vraxian colony world, crowds had gathered in protest, their rigid social hierarchy thrown into confusion by their champion's defeat. On the Talon homeworld, public celebrations had broken out, though the reasons remained tactfully unstated. "It's happening across 27 systems," Hiroshi explained. "Your victory wasn't just a personal combat win. You've inadvertently challenged the entire power structure of the Conclave." Before Alina could respond, The door slid open again. The willowy form of Emissary Ixon entered, followed by representatives from 3 other species Elena recognized from briefings. A methane-breathing krill, a silicon-based Morrigan, and a bioluminescent Loxy whose light patterns shifted in complex emotional patterns. "Commander Reyes," Jean began, in her eyelids flicking rapidly, "the Conclave Council requests your presence as soon as you are able." "I'm still recovering." Elena gestured to her medical restraints. "They are aware," the Krell representative rumbled, its translator struggling with the methane speech patterns. "The meeting will come to you. Such accommodation is unprecedented." As the representatives departed to make arrangements, Hiroshi leaned closer to Elena's bed. "Something else you should know. The Vraxian diplomatic contingent has withdrawn from the station entirely. Their last transmission referenced revaluation of interspecies combat doctrines." Elena closed her eyes briefly. This was never about winning a fight. This was about humanity's place among the stars. "And you've secured us quite a position," Dr. Chen added, studying the continuing feed of reactions across conclave space. "Though I'm not sure everyone is pleased about it." Indeed, on the central feed, a secure chamber deep within the conclave station showed the Elder Council in emergency session. The ancient Morrigan speaker, a being of shifting smoke-like consistency that had witnessed the rise and fall of a dozen civilizations, addressed the assembled elders. "We have miscategorized this species fundamentally." The Morrigan's translated voice resonated with unusual intensity. "They are not merely adaptable omnivores. They are combat evolution specialists who turned their homeworld's brutal conditions into a forge for their development." The holographic display showed Elena's neural patterns during combat. They experience fear but function through it, pain but calculate despite it. Their biological evolution has created something we've never encountered, a species that treats obstacles as opportunities. The vote was narrow but decisive. Containment protocols would be implemented against humanity. Subtle economic sanctions, technological restrictions, and cultural isolation designed to slow their integration into the galactic community until their potential could be properly assessed. As the session adjourned, the Morrigan remained behind, rewatching the combat recordings with what, despite vastly different biology, unmistakably resembled admiration. 1 year after Elena Reyes' historic victory in the arena of truth, humanity's expansion across the stars had stalled without apparent cause. Commander Reyes, now Admiral Reyes, following her promotion in recognition of her diplomatic and martial achievements, stood at the viewport of her new flagship, the UES Defiant, watching Earth grow smaller as they prepared for transit to the Alpha Centauri colony. The Talon freighter scheduled to deliver terraforming equipment to New Terra has been delayed. Again. Hiroshi, now her chief intelligence officer, delivered the report with thinly veiled frustration. Third such navigational error this month. "Admiral Reyes," the Vraxian began, mandibles clicking nervously. "I am Kvex, former tactical analyst for the Imperium. What I am about to tell you violates every oath I have sworn, but I can no longer remain silent while the Conclave betrays its founding principles." Elena studied the young Vraxian carefully. "I'm listening. The Elder Council has implemented containment protocols against humanity, but they're not acting alone." Kvex's compound eyes darted nervously. "There is a shadow organization within the Conclave, representatives from 17 elder species who have maintained power for millennia by systematically undermining emerging civilizations." Kvex transmitted a data packet that expanded into a complex network diagram, showing connections between seemingly unrelated events. The Ganymede attack, trade disruptions, diplomatic incidents, and even several deaths of key human leaders in supposedly natural accidents. "Your victory against High Marshal Kurthak exposed a fundamental flaw in their system," Kvex continued. "The elder species maintain power by ensuring no emerging civilization develops too quickly. Human adaptability represents an unprecedented threat to their control." "Why are you telling us this?" Hiroshi demanded, suspicion evident in his voice. Because the Vraxian Imperium is as much a victim as humanity, Kvex replied. Our society has been guided into endless military expansion, while our cultural and scientific growth is subtly stunted. Kvex defeat created a fracture in our rigid hierarchy. Many of us now question the path we've been led down for generations. Alina processed this information with the same analytical focus she had applied during combat. You're proposing an alliance. I'm proposing survival, Kvex corrected. The assassination order for you has already been issued, Admiral Reyes. The same shadow operatives who destroyed your Ganymede station are en route to this vessel now. As if summoned by his words, the ship's proximity alarms blared. 3 unidentified vessels had dropped out of FTL directly in the Defiance path, their designs unfamiliar to human tactical systems, but bearing energy signatures that dwarfed Earth's most powerful weapons. 3 years after the assassination attempt on Admiral Reyes, the Conclave capital station witnessed an unprecedented sight. 73 ships materialized from jump points simultaneously, their precisely calculated appearances forming a perfect 3-dimensional grid surrounding the massive structure. Each vessel bore different markings, not just the Earth crescent, but the emblems of 17 formerly subjugated species now united under the banner of what they called the Free Systems Alliance. On the command deck of the flagship Phoenix, Admiral Alina Reyes stood flanked by her improbable inner circle, Kvex, now leader of the Vraxian Reform Coalition, a Talon strategist whose mathematical mind had revolutionized Alliance battle tactics, a Xerer crystal mind whose memory contained centuries of conclave manipulation, and Dr. Chen, whose reverse-engineered neural technology now allowed instantaneous communication across the Allied fleet. Conclave Station is hailing us, Hiroshi reported from his station. The Elder Council demands our immediate surrender. Elena smiled slightly, the scar tissue around her left eye crinkling. The past 3 years had transformed her. The combat injuries had healed, but new ones had been added in the shadow war that followed. The assassination attempt on the Defiant had nearly succeeded. Only Kvex's warning and Elena's quick thinking had saved her flagship, though at terrible cost. 27 crew members lost, and the revelation that triggered everything that followed. Open a channel, she ordered, not just to the Council, to every connected system simultaneously. Kvex's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The moment of truth. The main view screen displayed the Elder Council chamber, where representatives of the oldest spacefaring civilizations had gathered in emergency session. Their expressions ranged from outrage to fear as Elena's image appeared before them. This is Admiral Alina Reyes of the Free Systems Alliance. 3 years ago, I came to this station representing only humanity. Today, I stand as one voice among many. She nodded to her communications officer, who activated the transmission they had prepared. Comprehensive records of millennia of sabotage and manipulation by the elder species. The data streamed not just to the Conclave, but to every inhabited world with access to the Galactic network. We do not come seeking vengeance, Alina continued as the evidence of systematic oppression spread like wildfire across thousands of worlds. We do not come seeking dominance. We come seeking partnership. At her command, the Alliance fleet activated their interconnected shield technology, a revolutionary system that allowed even the smallest vessels to withstand capital-grade weapons fire through shared energy distribution. The technology had been developed not through stolen secrets, but through collaborative innovation between human adaptability and the specialized knowledge of their new allies. For too long, the galaxy has been divided by artificial hierarchies. Alina's voice carried the weight of conviction earned through struggle. Species pitted against species. Advancement controlled by fear. The strong permitted to dominate the weak not through merit, but through manipulation. On the Conclave station, alarms began to sound as previously neutral species declared their allegiance to the Alliance principles. Across 17 systems, popular uprisings that had been carefully coordinated over months erupted simultaneously against Conclave administrators. You cannot hope to maintain control through force, the Morrigan speaker warned, its smoky form agitated. The consequences. We do not seek control, Elena interrupted. That is the fundamental difference between us. The Alliance operates on a principle alien to your thinking, mutual elevation. Each species contributes their strengths and is supported in their weaknesses. As if to demonstrate, the Alliance ships executed a complex maneuver that human military analysts alone could never have conceived. A tactical pattern developed by Talon mathematicians, implemented through Vraxian precision, powered by Xer crystal technology, and coordinated through human adaptability. The message was clear. This was not a single species challenging the Conclave, but a fundamental reimagining of interspecies relations. As previously neutral civilizations began formally requesting Alliance membership, the Morrigan requested a private audience with Elena. In the diplomatic chamber, the ancient being, who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, performed a gesture unseen in living memory, a formal vow. In 3 billion years of spacefaring civilization, the Morrigan acknowledged, its voice carrying the weight of eons, we never encountered a species that views difference as strength rather than competition. Your victory was inevitable from the moment your species left its cradle, not because of your resolve alone, but because you taught others to find their own. As the Conclave underwent reformation under a new charter written collaboratively by all species, Vex approached Elena on the observation deck. The young Vraxian, who had risked everything to warn her years earlier, now stood tall as a respected leader among his people. High Marshal Kurfak has requested a meeting, he informed her, a hint of amusement in his clicking mandibles. He wishes to present you with this. Vex handed Elena a ceremonial blade forged from the shattered armor of Kurfak himself. The inscription, written in multiple languages, read, "None dare challenge those who turn weakness into strength, who forge unity from diversity, who find victory not in domination, but in lifting others alongside them." Elena accepted the blade with a respectful nod, the final acknowledgement of a journey that had begun with a single combat and ended by reshaping the stars themselves.